You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hey Changanites, this is Deadpool Speaks, host of Chimichanga Talk, and you're about to listen to Chimichanga Talk Presents, a selection of great podcasts from all over the interwebs. As always, you can follow us by going to our website, chimichangatalk.com, or by giving us a like on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Chimichanga Talk. Also, follow me, Deadpool Speaks, on Twitter by searching at Deadpool Speaks for your latest geeky news and weekly giveaways. And now, I bring to you Chimichanga Talk Presents.
You're listening to The Monster. Good morning, everyone, and happy Monday. So far, this Monday is kicking me in my butt. On today's episode of The Monster, we have convention organizer Tom Croom. Tom is the founder of Wasabi Anime and the CEO of Green Mustard Entertainment. Green Mustard Entertainment has footprints in as many conventions as you can point a stick at. Tom has a tremendous amount of experience in organizing events and organizing conventions, and he taught me a lot about the business, about the industry, made me a little bit more appreciative of some of the conventions that I go to, a little bit more tolerant maybe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the sultry tones of Mr. And by the way, he has a great radio voice. Mr. Tom Croom.
The problem with creating delay time means I just start working on other projects, and then I suddenly realize I have to stop. So,
I greatly appreciate you putting up with me, sir. How's your day been?
Exhausting. The biggest problem I have right now is that hold on, I'm trying to fix my volume levels. Last week, my wife, in a fit of cruelty, decided that I needed to have both of my scheduled dentist appointments I needed to take care of early this year scheduled in the same week. So Monday I went in for a filling, and then I had a remnant of a wisdom tooth, which got extracted. So Friday was a lot of fun. So I spent my weekend on painkillers and antibiotics. So as awesome as that sounds...
Which it does not.
Good. Okay, perfect. So I will follow your lead at this point and sit here quietly until you need me to speak.
All right, fantastic. Tom Croom, welcome to The Monster.
Well, hello.
We are The Monster Podcast, and we are a geek culture podcast. What I'm trying to do is get to the aspects of our culture that don't typically get covered. Convention organizers being a big one. We go to all of these different conventions and we hang out at these places and we complain about how long the registration lines are and, the lines for the panels, but we never think about the guy that's trying to organize, anywhere from 500 people to maybe 50,000 people.
Well, and you said the guy, but the reality of it is where there's a lot of people like me that exist in this industry as very noteworthy personalities. It's never one guy, and it's always a bunch of people. I recently, the best example I give, just a little background on myself and the history of what I do. In the late 19 or actually mid 1990s, I grew up and moved to Orlando, Florida, because that's where you got to grow up, and wound up working in the theme park industry for Universal Studios and for Disney simultaneously, which you can't do in today's day and age. But back then, if you were talented, they would fight over you. It was kind of nice. It was like the two girls both vying for your attention. Just prior to that, and during that era, I had grown up in the late 80s, early 90s as a Star Trek nerd. I used to frequent Star Trek conventions in South Florida and then Orlando. For those really old people who remember, there was a convention called Volcon back in the day. And I used to go win costume contests, have fun. So flash forward to the late 90s, I wound up meeting a beautiful young woman who eventually became my wife. And she was into the Japanese cartoons, anime. And I saw a flyer somewhere when I was out shopping with her in Orlando saying, hey, there's a local anime convention. We should go. She was wondering why. I said, well, you're really hot. So if you put on a costume and go to this, you'll win free stuff. And at that age, free stuff is important. So we wound up going to that. And what basically wound up happening is I had built my history and knowledge of being a geek by going to geek conventions. Then I wound up stepping into, event operation expertise by working directly for theme parks. I helped open City Walk as an entertainment coordinator at Universal and things like that. And then I got myself entrenched into a really colorful, wonderful culture, which is anime fan culture, in the early 2000s. So you take that concoction, and right around 2001, I created a group called Wasabi Anime. Now, the goal of Wasabi Anime was basically the phrase we used was, we got tired of seeing the same damn panels at every convention, quote unquote. We used to say that to ourselves, because you'd go to every anime convention and you see, hey, there's cosplay 101, there's intro to anime, and it's the same thing. So we started coming up with, how could we do fun, creative things, do it for other conventions, but make sure it's not normal. So by the mid 2000s, we were doing things like, anime stage shows. We created the Wasabi Anime musical, which, now you can go to any convention and go, oh, well, there's a chess match, or there's a large scale stage show. But, circa 2004, we were the people starting these ideas and coming up with these things in Central Florida. And it was a lot of fun. It eventually garnered us a lot of attention to the point that we had other conventions start contacting us saying, hey, would you like to come visit our show and do this? And we like a good excuse to travel. And at one point, it was an out-of-state show, and we're like, well, we appreciate it, but it's a little far. We like traveling here in Florida, and it's local. But then they confused us and said, well, no, we'll give you money. And then at that point, we started realizing, well, we must be doing something right or wrong or both. And in 2007, realizing that our ventures were extending above and beyond just normal hobbies, we created Green Mustard LLC, which is born out of Wasabi Anime, because we started realizing we had a bunch of really great ideas of fun things to do, but they weren't all anime anymore. So Green Mustard was created and operated 3 years as an LLC before we took on so many projects and became involved in so much that a few years later, it is now the current corporation, which is Green Mustard Entertainment, Inc. We own 3 active conventions, 2 in side production and pre-production. We have contracts with shows in the past few years, all the way as far as Los Angeles with Anime Expo, Gen Con in Indianapolis, as small as local shows like, Conjure last year was the DreamCon spinoff. So we do a little bit of work with everyone, but it really, truly, honestly is our hobby gone horribly wrong. And I did that whole story just wraps back to a conversation I had last week, which was there's a very popular film franchise that I'm a geek for called The Fast and the Furious. I love The Fast and the Furious. I judge away. It's great. But the reason I love The Fast and the Furious is when it started in 2001, it's now eventually become here's a franchise about cars into here's a group of creative, different, multi-ethnic, multi-minded, multi-gender people that when you put them all together, really amazing things happen. And that's kind of how Wasabi Anime happened and turned into Green Mustard Entertainment. And, coming full circle to where we are in 2015, it's how we get to look at things and do things now, which is a lot of fun. But again, coming back to, talking about myself, I love being the large personality that I am, but I know, a lot of us promoters know each other and, we're larger than life. And hey, you can look me up on Urban Dictionary since 2005, but a lot of promoters tend to forget every once in a while. It's not just one person. It's not just two people. It's a ton of people that go in behind the scenes that make these shows amazing for, thousands, just like I said, anywhere from 500 to 50,000 attendees on any given day. So,
well, Tom, you've just answered every question I had for you, so it's been a pleasure talking to you. No, that was beautiful. That was absolutely comprehensive. Yeah, I have a question about the name, and I think that I know the answer, but I'm going to go ahead and ask anyway.
Sure.
Green Mustard Entertainment, where does the name come from?
Well, as I mentioned before, when we started, we had a little bit of club politics back in the early 2000s. A little anime history. The old school anime fan club in Orlando was the Japanese Animation Club of Orlando. And this is stuff I didn't know until a year or so being involved in fandom in the early 2000s. And they spun off, and there were a couple of spin-off clubs that were born out of that. Now JCO, the Japanese Animation Club of Orlando, is from the University of Central Florida. So there were other clubs, some of them still around today, like Anime Sushi was created out of JCO. And then Anime Gaijin America was actually another club, which eventually became the group that now runs Anime Festival Orlando. The trick was the first convention that made contact with myself and my then girlfriend, because they found out I could work in entertainment, was Anime Festival Orlando. And, I'm willing to help anybody. So I said, listen, sure, I'll help out. And then once I helped one person, I found out the politics of, if you helped them, you must hate everybody else. And after 2001, we discovered that was kind of the political landscape of Central Florida anime clubs. So in order to try to sidestep it, not necessarily successfully, but in order to do it, we decided we were going to have to create our own anime club. And it was going to be an entity that walked forward with, hey, we're going to help anybody. And true story, it was myself and a guy named Kevin sitting on the internet back in 2001, August of 2001 to be exact, looking up domain names that hadn't been claimed that sounded like cool anime club names. So we came up with, I kept coming up with names. I said, look this up. He'd say, no, that's taken. Look this up. And understand there was no GoDaddy back then. So we're on Registrar, and registering a domain is like $80. So, we're putting a lot of money to try to make this happen. And nobody owned wasabianime.com. So we registered wasabianime.com, only to discover 3 months later that there was a fan subgroup in San Diego also called Wasabi Anime, but they bought the hyphen first. So it was Wasabi-Anime, which to this day eludes us. They're now defunct. They were a nice group of people. We actually had some fun with them back and forth once we became established. But eventually what wound up happening as Wasabi Anime evolved and we were doing events for the shows, we started looking at the concepts. For example, we have Florida Comics Experience is our Melbourne show that happens every August. This will be our third year running a comic book only convention. We have the Pinup Palooza, our pinup girl convention, which is in pre-production. And then probably our most famous in the world is we owned the Invader Zim convention, InvaderCon. The problem was none of those three things are necessarily anime. So wasabi, if you follow, the technical description of it, is actually green mustard. So when we decided to name the company, we went with Green Mustard LLC, and then now we are, fully formed corporation for a number of years now, Green Mustard Entertainment, which invokes our favorite color, which makes theming really, really easy for shopping and business cards. And number two, it still equates back to our roots, which was, a nerdy little anime fan club in 2001.
Nice. I just want to bet with myself.
Well, as long as you don't welch on it, you should be good.
No, I owe myself a glass of milk. All right. So how big is your team?
Currently, we usually fluctuate between 25 to 30 people. And it's a rotating group. And the reason it's a rotating group is for a couple of reasons. One, we don't operate on a volunteer basis. Since we started doing this, we had a very, very big ideology on the concept that everybody's time is worth something. And even if I'm not paying somebody $1 million, I don't expect somebody to pay money to run a convention, if that makes sense. Because we volunteered for shows for years, and when you start out, that's how you do it. It's, well, I'm going to volunteer my 8 hours a day for these 4 days for this convention for setup and loadout. So I've given you 40 hours of my life over 5 days. But while I'm doing that, I'm spending money to be there. I have to drive myself there and stuff like that. So we started building ourselves on a cost-neutral analysis to make sure that anybody who works our show, I don't care if you are running my registration table or if you are standing in front of the door to convention, you are not spending money to be at the show. We're covering your costs, whether it's per diem or gas or reimbursement of hotel, things like that. So because we operated on such a tight concept that way, we steered away from solicitation. We get emails all the time of, hey, I'd like to volunteer for your show. We don't take volunteers. We operate on a mafia mentality. And the way the mafia mentality is somebody in a family has to vouch for you and bring you in. So, for example, say I know somebody and I'm like, hey, this is a cool dude. I think he'd be great to work with us. He'd fit in well with the group. I would vouch for him and say, hey, he's going to volunteer this year and watch the door for us. And, we're covering it. Here's this comp plan like everyone else. And if at the end of the first convention this person works, they are horrible. It's two things. One, we just, hey, it didn't work out. We appreciate you trying to help. But number two, it makes me look bad. So that way I feel more responsibility when I bring in creative people. So because of that, we've always successfully kind of floated around, I'd say between 25, 35 people on any given day. And I think if I can actually tell you the current staff number, because I'm sitting in front of my computer while talking to you, I think at last count, we are right around... click. It's amazing how you can think you can do these things smoothly and make it sound like, oh, I'm casually looking stuff up in the back. Yeah, we've got about 38 people on the team this year right now. So,
wow. So, what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, up until 15 months ago, normal. I just like everyone else, I had a normal job. I actually worked for a business turnaround company Monday through Friday, did my job, and came home and played with my hobby gone horribly wrong. Since then, we hit the realization. Basically, what happened was last summer, the company I work for did some downsizing, and they offered me a new position in another department. And basically, same job, different department. I said, listen, I've got a lot of stuff going on with my crazy little hobby here. Let me take a 30-day hiatus from work. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. No problem. You've got a standing offer. Come back. So 30 days went by, and then suddenly 60 days went by. And then I was like, okay, it's now been 90 days. I swear I know I need to come back at some point, but I'm just really busy. This is not stopping. So somehow in having those conversations, I still have a great relationship. I can go, I guess I talked to the people, the company I worked for before, and I have an open door. But the reality of it is I just haven't had time because with the shows that we run. So on any given day, while I'm speaking to you right now, I'm actually sitting at my office desk. There is a giant dry erase board in front of me. Starting from the left, there's a column for Florida Anime Experience, which is April 24th through 26th, 2015. And there's a list of things in dry erase that we're going through, making sure we cover for that show. Then Florida Comics Experience, which is August 8th. And just following that example, tomorrow I'm spending the day in Melbourne, Florida. I have about 5 meetings set up, confirming guests and working on locations. Next over, we have Pinnapalooza. We're still negotiating and trying to find a new home for that as we retool that show. WasabiCon is the next column. That one is confirmed for the October 31st, November 1st in Jacksonville, and I will be in Jacksonville on Thursday working on that show. And then one of our side projects that took off really well, we own a talent booking company that actually books actors into other conventions called Talent for Cons. Has its own column with a bunch of other sub projects that we're working on right now to help get actors into other shows. And then the whole other right of the board is Green Mustard Entertainment, which is our little sub project of here are the things that don't fit into these 5 primaries that we're working on. And I'm trying to see if there's something I can look at on there that I can say out loud. Well, for example, we're not doing InvaderCon anymore, but we have an offer from a startup that's trying to do like a T-Fury sort of thing, and they want to do a limited edition InvaderCon T-shirt. So we've talked to them about allowing them to use us as a test, and we're going to run that. We have the latest draft of our Gen Con contract needs to be reviewed, and there's another show in the Midwest that's signing us for another appearance. So my day every day is I get up early in the morning, I make myself an omelet, I go to the gym, I come back here, and then the key things that have to happen every day are get through the inbox because there's always emails flooding every given second. Make sure we get at least one social media blast out a day for all the shows so that people know that we're active and there's news coming out. And then depending on what show is the focus of that day, work on the process of that. Like I said, today was just kind of catch up from the weekend. Tuesday is Florida Comics. Wednesday is meetings day. Every Wednesday I have about 5 to 6 meetings scheduled every day with all the shows and events that we work with to keep things on point. Thursday, first half of the day is Florida Anime Experience. I'll be in Orlando and then Jacksonville, and then that's about it. It's, rinse, repeat, and do over.
So, with everything that you've got going on, do you have an opportunity to even understand what an amazing, I don't want to say opportunity, but I guess really in the end, what an amazing opportunity you have kind of opened up for yourself here?
Well, I never take that for granted, and the attorney friend of mine, people I know when I was in Los Angeles, I came up with a phrase 2 years ago, and they're like, you need to trademark that now, which is, I have a hobby gone horribly wrong. And I know that it was a hobby, and I know that it is, but even talking to my late father a couple of years ago, the first time I had to fly to Tokyo to Japan to talk about working with conventions in the United States, hitting the realization in my mind that I was just a nerd who really liked the Transformers, wound up speaking about it a lot at conventions, and now somebody is paying to put me up in a hotel in a foreign country to stand around with people and go, no, I swear we're not as crazy as you think in America. Come out and check this stuff out. It's a golden opportunity. The B side to it is, and what I think a lot of people miss is, I just gave you a good description of my week. I sleep like 6 hours a night. It is nonstop work. So use Indiana Jones parlance. It's all about the fortune and glory, kid. But man, there's a lot of work and a lot of, dodging the boulders and running through the traps and getting around. It's really, really a lot of work that goes into this and a lot of thought versus, but the reward is huge. I mean, it really is just I get to run conventions for a living, and it's something that I actually enjoy doing, which anybody, you talk to anybody in the creative field, a writer, artist, something like that, anybody who gets lucky enough to go, somehow I fell into the career that was something I enjoy doing for fun, then it's always very lucky. So,
not to get too maybe esoteric, but all of this has brought up an additional question, and that is, do you feel like that this was a plan or this was an accident? The way you tell the story, you could argue that it was an accident. Here's this, kind of hobby I'm doing on the side, and it just so happens the job decides to downsize, and I kind of decide that, well, maybe I'll dabble in the hobby a little bit more than I have been in the past, and then it turns into something. Or could you look at it like this is something that has been in the back of my mind, maybe buried under some things, and it's always been there, and it's just taken until now for it to find a way to come to fruition?
Not to give a cop-out answer, but I think it's both. And the reason I think it's both is because there has to be forethought and planning that goes into these things. And one of my favorite analogies I beat into the ground is the people who are successful at doing this on any level know the difference between playing checkers and playing chess. And when we made the jump from, hey, in 2007, let's create Green Mustard as an entertainment company with my partners involved, the idea was, and it's funny because we had, you draw the best laid plans on notebook paper and then realize years later you're still following them. And it was we need a finite number of conventions. We don't want one big giant show. We want a number of small, better shows. So we had our branding in place. And the best description we give for the branding is there are a number, and just to give you the mindset of Green Mustard as a whole, because it adapts to what we're going at. There are so many conventions in not just North America, but in the world now. The pop culture conventions are mainstream. And you can go to any number of shows in Florida, and I equate it to going shopping at Walmart or shopping at Target. And don't get me wrong, I love going to Target. You can walk in and go down straight to the back, and I can pick up a T-shirt. And while I'm grabbing my T-shirt, I swing down, pick up the latest video game, stop by the grocery section, get a dozen eggs, and on my way back, make sure I pick up a birthday card for a friend. So it's kind of, you walk in and there's everything you need access to. You walk around, you have fun, and that's what those shows are. The problem is it's so much of everything. So you're drawing and growing based on that concept. When we built our show concepts and we hit the reset button in 2010 and started building Florida Anime Experience, our thing was that the shows were going in too many different directions. We wanted to build focus again. So, motto for year one of Florida Anime Experience was no Halo in the game room. It's not a Japanese video game. It's not on a Japanese video game system. Let's make sure we create focus on our shows. So we equate ourselves a little more to the Apple Store. So branding in that concept takes planning and sticking to your guns when you build something. So going back to, did we think this was going to be a full-fledged business that was going to operate this way? No. We just knew that if you're going to do something, you do it right no matter what. And I think a lot of that came into my business partner who works with me, where I have the years at Universal. He has years in Disney. And so we kind of have what we call theme park DNA in us. So whenever we look at our conventions, it's, how did we do it in the theme parks? Now, how do we apply that to this concept? So was there a grand plan that, hey, this will be a business someday? No, but you still always, and I, go back to upbringing children, how my parents raised me, whatever. And even Ken's the same way of, if you're going to do something, do it right. I mean, don't half-ass it. So if it does turn out to be something spectacular, you make sure you put the effort into it. Because he used to get, there are people that went into doing this full time years ago before we ever even touched it. And it used to be, we'd go to conventions and be like, these guys are doing conventions no better than how we're doing it. And Ken would be the first one to point out, he goes, yeah, it's amazing. You and I have full-time jobs. This is their full-time job, and we're still doing a better job in our spare time, which means people aren't paying attention to details. So was it destiny? Was it planned? No, but you always act as if, and sometimes when the window opens, you make sure you jump through.
Okay, yeah. It's going to take me 3 days to process all of that. What experience did you have going into the first convention? I know you said that you had spent time with Disney and Universal, but it seems to me like an innate need for some business experience is there.
Yes and no. Well, our business experience, the best experience is always going to be experience. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. Our very first convention the Green Mustard put on was a science fiction convention we did in 2007 called Assimilation, and it lost a lot of money. I mean, it lost a lot of money. But we are very, very big on making sure our names are our brand. So, all the bills were paid. All the actors were paid. Everybody was covered so that we could walk away from this storm and go, oh, this is awful, but we did it. And at the time, it was painful. But in retrospect, we go, wow, there's all the things we got to crash course ourselves into quickly to know how to operate a convention. And there's so many operational guidelines we use that we learned from just building that show from scratch. Because keep in mind, any other shows we had all worked on prior were, hey, they're doing this, do that like they do it. They're doing this, do that like that, do it. So when we built Assimilation, it was start at zero. Just take a blank piece of paper and build it entirely different. And we tested 10 different things that we hadn't tried or seen done at shows. 5 of them were brilliant, and 5 of them are hidden in a box, under a bed, under lock, never to be seen again. But you take those risks, that's how you learn it. As far as the experience you need to do it, I think the single most important piece is there's 2 pieces that make running conventions easier or make it more successful. And number one is being able to talk to people, which sounds like a big deal, or not like a big deal, but it is a big deal. The example we always talk about is that when you talk to convention promoters, 90% of the people who start especially anime conventions, 90% of the people who start an anime convention are fans learning to run a convention. 10% of the people are people who worked in some sort of entertainment or events field that happen to be a fan of something and looking to apply that skill. So again, my business partner Ken worked at theme park operations for years. I did the same thing working for entertainment and operations at Universal Studios. So a lot of our core concepts down to the most simple things like, oh, there's going to be a long line. Plan for that long line. Here's how you handle line management. If we're going to have a celebrity VIP come through, well, hey, when we're bringing somebody backstage at Universal Studios, which way do we make sure that we avoid the crowds, and what are the stop gaps we put in place? So I think theme park experience and then just life experience being in conventions are the two biggest parts that really contributed to the experiences we have.
Can I ask some strictly mechanical questions about running a convention?
Sure.
All right. How do you balance... it's going to be the best way to put this. How do you balance crowd control with fire marshal requirements, essentially?
That's a tricky one. We fix that. We don't have that issue. And the reason we don't have that issue is because we actually cap every single one of our shows. So, for example, Florida Anime Experience for the past couple of years has been capped at 2,000. We hit 2,000 on Saturday. We say, we're done, come back tomorrow. And then this year we've expanded to 10,000 more square feet. So I think the soft cap right now is 2,500. I think I've said 2,600 because I'm an Atari nerd and I think it's a funny joke. As far as deciding how to manage the balance between the two, it really, really, really comes down to communication. Again, our brand is about creating an experience. It's, pardon the language, but we're not trying to create another assholes to elbows crowd of people trying to force through a vendor's room smelling each other. We're trying to create a contained environment where we know, hey, there's this many people, manage this many people, and keep it within the means that we do. And it took us a couple of years to realize what that balance was. And it was trial and error. It's how many people do we need managing lines versus that? I mean, the last Wasabi Con in Jacksonville, we got a sudden burst in popularity that we weren't expecting. And suddenly Saturday we had, a line going out the door, which was great. Those worst problems to have in the world. But on the same note, we needed to move that line. So I had to pull a couple of my staffers who were running the video game room and the gaming room, who I also know, one of the guys is a lead at Universal Studios and helped open the new Harry Potter. So the guy knew how to go down, get a line in order, and keep it managed. So, the short answer to what I've given a long dissertation to is this: know your numbers. So if you know your numbers and your capacity in your room and you have good floor plans and you plan for it and you staff accordingly, then you should never have an issue with an overcrowding. And if you do, it's communicating ahead of time how to with the crowd.
I mentioned registration earlier, and it always seems to be, anyway, a sore spot, especially with the bigger conventions. Over the years, what have you learned about registration?
I've learned that the only way you get registration to work at a convention is to be ready to change it almost every year. And especially in the age of the internet, there are always new processes. And if you stay ahead of the curve on those processes, your registration process is the best. For the best example, I love Dragon Con. It's a wonderful convention. We performed there, we booked talent there. But for years, it was a running joke that I would never pre-register because they could never handle their pre-registration line. And I had my friends that were like, well, I saved my $40 because I got there and I'm waiting in line, and I would show up with them and I'd watch them get in line. And I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago where Ken finally thought it was so funny he snapped because his wife had pre-registered and she was standing in line to go pick up her badge. I walked into registration and everybody trying to save a buck was in that line. But I walked up, I go, okay, which line is shorter right now for on-site, cash or credit? And they said, well, nobody ever brings cash for these things, so there's nobody even standing in that line. So it took me 5 minutes to go in, and I spent an extra, I think it was $35 versus pre-registration. So my math was 3 hours of my life is worth a hell of a lot more than $35, and now I can walk around freely. Ken finally got annoyed to the point, because he didn't know he was coming to the last minute, took his wife out of line, went in and bought her a whole separate pass.
Oh.
Just because it was easier. He's like, I'll spend the $100 just because it's not worth not knowing when this is going to end. And since then, Dragon Con has evolved and gotten better. But the answer to registration is one, just going in order. Number one, learning your show's patterns and staffing accordingly. We know that every Saturday, as soon as we open, we're going to have a line. We know Saturday around 2 o'clock, you get a bump because that's when people are showing up. You know that Friday after 5 is when you're going to see people show. You learn your patterns. And some of that you have to learn. First year, second year, third year shows, There's a learning curve. It's going to come with it. Number two, be on top of what's available as far as tools, because every year something comes on board. And that's something that could probably make your life easier. I've flown out to and I've sat in meetings with Eventbrite in San Francisco. And when we started talking to them a couple of years ago when I was on a contract for Anime Expo, they were shocked because they looked at the history we had and they're like, wow, you guys were around with us in like 2007. I said, yeah, when you launched, we found you. And we've been using you ever since. They're like, really? Like, it was really hard back then. I'm like, well, we can write code. We knew how to work around it. But even that much less work made our lives easier to do. And the less process you can build into it is simpler. So number one, learn your own patterns. That's going to take a couple of years. Number two, find keep up to date every single year because there's always new tools that are coming out. And number three, take the time to go to other shows. Because the more you see what other shows do, and don't go there looking for problems, go there as an attendee. I give people crap all the time because I'll show up at conventions and I'll have showrunners be like, oh, somebody told me you were here. Did you get a comp badge? I'm like, nope, I went and bought a badge. Like, why? I'm like, because I believe in spending money to support your show. And, number two, I wanted to walk through your queue line to see how long it took to get there. So, that's research. Don't be lazy. Actually go through the hell of doing it to learn it. You don't learn how well a theme park is going to handle line control until you actually go through the entire line and see how long it took. So the tools, research your own show tools and then research other shows. And there is no perfect formula I've seen yet. I've seen some shows that have really gone above and beyond to smooth it out. If I had to pick a show off the top of my head that I know I've had a really great experience at as far as seeing how they handle things. Gen Con is one of the handful of conventions in North America that actually mails out their badges to pre-registered people ahead of time. So you don't even have to go to somewhere to pick it up. You already have it when you get there.
Nice.
Yep.
So
that said, keep in mind that Gen Con is over 45 years old now, so they've had some time to work out the bugs.
Are they really 45 years?
Yeah, I think it's right around there. They're older than I am. I know that much. That's the general rule I use.
So, the continuing on the subject of kind of crowd control, cosplay can bring out the worst in some people. How do you guys handle security?
In order to deal with attendees, you always have to remember that they are paying money to come there and have fun. And this goes back to, and again, maybe this is an advantage we've always had, but this just goes back to the Central Florida theme park mentality. When I worked at my first theme park job ever, I was one of the original Jaws boat skippers at Universal Studios. And you were taught that you were going to have this family that came all the way from Iowa, and they are going to be standing in the sun, and it's going to be 100 degrees, and they're going to be sweating, and their kid is crying because he just went on Jaws, and Jaws scared him, even though you told him it was a scary ride, and he got wet. And nothing is your fault. You have done nothing wrong as an employee. We've done nothing wrong as a company. But they're just going to be upset. It's just the nature of the beast. Cosplayers and costumers and costume hobbyists have spent months and tons of money building these costumes, coming in. And at that point in time, their entire universe is focused on how important their experience is in their costume. That doesn't always make for the greatest social interactions. People are going to get irritated. You bumped into my wing. I can't believe this. Why can't I wear this? Et cetera, et cetera. How do you handle it? It's just patience. Everybody's human. Treat everybody like a human. Treat people like you want to be treated yourself. It all sounds like the most rudimentary concepts in the world, but you have to be able to do that. Now, the B side is, as a convention manager, make sure that you put people in those positions that have the ability to do so. My business partner, Ken, we joke all the time. He has this rule. He's like, I don't talk to actors, because he knows that he's we're very yin and yang, glass half full, glass half empty. That's why we're so successful working together. But when we were confronted with a situation, there was a young woman who came to one of the FAs, I want to say it was 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a popular anime costume to walk around topless with X taped over your nipples. because it's how it's presented in the anime. Unfortunately, it's not how it's presented at our show with the laws and constraints of the area. So we saw her or somebody on the staff saw her and called us and said, hey, we have an attendee with this. How do we approach that? And, Kenny's like, oh, no. I can't have that conversation. I'm like, that's fine. I'll go do it. So I walk up, and the first thing I tell her is, I do a little research on my phone, make sure I know the character's name. And I go, by the way, your so-and-so costume is amazing. She's like, really? I'm like, yes. I say, that really is dead on. You did a good job. That said, unfortunately, I can't have you wearing that around here because we're a family-friendly show. She goes, well, it was for a photo. I'm like, I understand that. So I wasn't trying to get her to immediately respect my authority and tell her that, put on some clothes, kid. It was, I understand you put some work into this. It's just the presentation of it. So making sure that you have staffers and people with the correct personalities to deal with that is probably the single most important part of that entire equation of managing crowds and managing costume enthusiasts. What
about the potential for harassment of the cosplayers? Does that fall under the same umbrella?
That falls into that's cosplay is not consent, and we've been very vocal about that, and we're one of the early adopters. If you go to any of our conventions, we have policies against that. Cosplay is supposed to be a judgment-free zone. It's supposed to be fun. It was a niche hobby that's now a mainstream hobby, and just like anything else, you're going to have people that are going to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything. But the trick is, say what you want to say, do what you want to do, but I guess the best way to put it, just don't be a dick. And if there is, and you are presented with situations like that, you handle them correctly, which is, again, understand that there's 2 points to every point of view and have everybody have a discussion involved. Now, I think the way that we as a company have dodged dealing with too many issues, we have dealt with those issues before, but not on a major level, is we've worked very, very hard to make sure that our shows are family friendly, not necessarily like our content is only like G-rated the whole time. We do have 18 plus, but it's, late at night, check IDs, etc. But life is in the details. And if you look at the fine print of our registration forms, or when you pick up your ticket, because we get emails about it all the time, when kids finally read the fine print, we always make the joke about the South Park iPad Human Centipede episode of we actually do have fine print that's in there for a purpose. And it says that if you are under the age of 18 and you show up with your ID and you don't have a parent or guardian to check you into the show, you're not getting into the show. And we've had kids stand in the lobbies of convention centers and hotels, and we're like, I can't help you. Like, you need to call your mom. They need to come out and sign off on you coming into here because, it says in our rules, we are not a babysitting service. And I think because we haven't looked the other way on that, because if you've been to a number of conventions, you've seen it. It's the mom and dad drop off the gaggle of kids, and they're running around and they're going to be there all day, and they'll go pick them up at night. We try to discourage that by encouraging a convention culture where we want the parents to come out and have fun with their kids, or we want the kids to bring their parents to see what they're getting into. Because, my parents were in no way, shape, or form into any sort of pop culture. My no real pop music. I mean, we grew up in Tennessee. The Dukes of Hazzard was like the pinnacle of culture for them when I grew up. But they were very supportive of the fact that their nerd kid loved Star Wars and Star Trek and video games, so they were fine with that. My dad would go to a Star Trek convention with me just to go sit through the audience and go, oh, that's the guy from The Next Generation. I know who that is because you watched that. Yeah, so my parents got involved. So coming back to the cosplay is not consent issue, that's always going to be an issue. It's not going to go away. And it just goes back to making sure your staffing is correctly done for personalities to handle that. But at our core culture for our events, the way we dodge it more often than not is by presenting the fact that this is supposed to be a community and family event. So bring mom and dad, bring your friends, and you're all supposed to be here together having a good time.
Well, Tom, that is almost 45 minutes. That time went by so quickly. So I'd like to ask you one more. Well, actually, I guess I'd like to ask you two more questions.
That's fine.
I'm going to let you go. What is the secret? No, wait. That part gets edited out.
Okay.
Because I literally have a ton of questions that we just are not going to have time to get to. But, so, oh, yes, that's the one. Let's say today or tomorrow I wanted to start the process of starting a convention. What would you recommend?
That's a great question, actually, because I get asked that a lot. And I take meetings with people. I've sat down with people all the time because people hear hey, I'm thinking about starting a convention. Somebody told me I should talk to you. And I have had this conversation dozens of times. And when people talk about doing a convention, I'm all about promoting fandom. But I always say, okay, there's 3 things I want you to think about before you decide to do a convention. Number 1. Is there somebody already doing what you're doing in the region you're doing it? Is there a need for it? For example, in Orlando, Florida, in the mid-2000s, everybody and their mother was creating an anime convention. You couldn't walk 10 feet without tripping over a new one. And the question I kept asking is, why are you starting an anime convention? Go start your own. Even within our company, we got offered money by outside financiers years ago to start a convention in Jacksonville, Florida. There was a pre-existing show there at the time that filled the need that they were asking for. They just didn't like the people. And I didn't necessarily get along with the promoter, but I'm like, yeah, even if I don't get along with somebody, though, they're still providing the service in that area. Why would I come in? All I'm going to do is super saturate a market, splinter a fandom, support your local show. So step 1, if you're going to create a new show, is there a need for it in your area? Okay. Number 2, if you're going to start your own show, are you financially stable enough to do it? And that sounds like such a harsh question, but it's a true question. When everything fell down on our first show, we were very lucky that we had the resources to turn around and go, hey, yeah, we owe this much to this actor, and everybody's paid. But if you do your due diligence on shows in history, there are conventions that have taken place that in the state of Florida, the state's attorneys have been called and police have showed up because they couldn't pay their bills. And there are laws against walking out on a hotel bill in the state of Florida that are pretty harsh because we're a tourist state, and it turned into a major issue. So, number 2, make sure you at least have the financial resources, because before we open the door to our convention, we have proprietary balance sheets that we run on all of our shows, but we have what we call the magic number, and the magic number is what we have to hit to be in the black. But whatever that number is before the doors open, we know that there's X amount of dollars in the bank account that if 0 people showed up that day, all the bills are paid. So again, number 1, make sure that there's a need in your area that you're doing something, that somebody's not already doing it. Number 2, make sure you're financially stable. Number 3, what are you going to do that's different from everybody else? Because even if there is there's over in Podunk, Florida, there's no anime con. Well, you can drive 45 minutes to one or 45 minutes to the other. Yeah, but we're going to put an anime con here. Just doing it for the sake of saying you're doing it isn't doing anything new or innovative. Every year I write a blog post about here's all the fan conventions, geek conventions in Florida, and each year it gets harder and harder to tell them apart. Do something innovative that makes it different, because then it's fun. We created the Invader Zim convention because it was our throwback to old Star Trek conventions. It was about one TV show. How crazy does that sound in today's day and age? You know what I mean? So if you're going to start a convention, what are you going to do that's different from what everybody else is doing right now? And make sure it's different. I mean, even like I said, we're a little arrogant about it, but Florida Anime Experience, we still brag. We're the anime convention in Florida. We don't have any My Little Pony panels. I check all the conventions every year to find their MLP panel or their Homestuck panel or their Prom Stuck and go, none of that is anime. We keep that out of our show. We're very strict on our rules. So being a pure anime convention is now an anomaly in our state, which is why we created it. So your question is people ask me, should I start a convention? Sure. Ask yourself 3 questions. 1, is there a need in the area you're doing it for? Number 2, are you financially stable enough to do it? And number 3, what are you going to do that's different that hasn't already been done? Because otherwise you're just retreading old ground.
All right, so my second question is, let me go 3 questions. Second question is, so what have you got coming up? I think you covered this earlier, but in case there's anything you left out, what do you have coming up?
Well, let's see. We'll jump the gun and go ahead and talk about stuff that doesn't exist yet. We have promotional appearances, which is fine. Like Orlando Anime Day will be there, things like that. We're actually our shows themselves that are happening April 24th through the 26th, 2015 will be our 5th year running Florida Anime Experience. Each year we theme it after an anime, and this year's anime is Evangelion, and we have the English voices of the 4 primary pilots from the Evangelion movie series. Then fast forward into June, and there is a show in Columbus, Ohio called Origins Game Fair. And Wasabi Anime will be appearing this year tentatively to design and run an anime track for them. It'll be our first going. It's a 15,000 person show. They've been around for about 30 some odd years, so it's supposed to be a lot of fun. We're looking forward to that. We have also signed to appear at Gen Con again. I believe this is our 5th or 6th year. I've lost count there, which is the largest tabletop gaming convention in North America. Roughly around 51,000 unique that show up for 4 days to roll dice and have fun. And we make sure that the people who are there get exposed to Japanese pop culture, and that will take place the last weekend of July, early August. I personally will be attending. I'm an alumni and co-founder of Project Anime, which is the annual anime convention conference started by Anime Expo. So I'll be there 4th of July weekend. Then WasabiCon takes place October 31st through November 1st. It's our 4th year running our pop culture event in Jacksonville, Florida. Prior to that, I think I skipped August 8th will be Florida Comics Experience. So I think that covers most of the months for the year. I'm planning on taking a nap in November, but I can't confirm that yet.
So, can you tell the internet where they can find you?
Yes, my address. No, I'm just kidding. Well, the business itself is easy. It's again, the company's Green Mustard. So if you go to www.greenmustard.com, you'll find links to all of our conventions and upcoming events. Any event I have named, if you Google it, you are guaranteed to find every form of social media available. Florida Anime Experience, all of them have an Instagram, a Twitter, a Google Plus, a Facebook, Snapchat. I mean, we're literally hardwired into the internet beyond belief when it comes to those. As far as my personal rantings, I've been a blogger on the internet for well over a decade, complaining about fan culture, pop culture, and then living in the state of Florida. And my blog is www.tomcroom.com.
Tom, it has been a real pleasure, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. Look forward to hearing the show start to air. And, I wish I had some clever, witty thing to say at the end, like, look before you leap, or I should come up with something when I do these interviews now, like, remember to wear deodorant at the convention, or bring a rebreather into the game room, or, all the other stereotypes. But the short answer of it is, if I had to be serious about it, we actually make all of our guests, and one of them pointed out to it too, our featured talent and guests at all of our convention have to follow the same rules that we do. And one of the things that we stipulate in our contract under expectations of guests, along with, behave professionally, be at panels on that, blah, 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 we actually have a bullet point. And I think it's the most important bullet point that people miss when it comes to doing conventions, whether they're working them, attending them, guesting them, speaking at them, or doing anything. And that's to have fun.
Brilliant. That is the perfect way to end, man. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the amazing Tom Croom. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. I learned quite a bit. Hope you did too. In the coming weeks and the coming months, you can look forward to... It's a new little thing I'm doing here at the end. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek at what's coming up. I've got interviews with Philippa Ballantyne and T. Morris. They are authors, they are podcasters, they are the heart of steampunk, and they are awesome. I have an interview with cosplayer, interviewer, cosplay personality, RJ Floyd. He is amazing. I have an interview with Diane Powell. She is a neuroscientist and parapsychologist. And an interview with Heather and Garth Reesby. They are publishers. So some pretty cool stuff coming up. Stay tuned to the monster. Goodbye. Enjoy your Monday. This is mine.
Hey Changanites, thanks for listening to Chimichanga Talk Presents. As always, you can follow us by going to our website, chimichangatalk.com, or by giving us a like on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Chimichanga Talk. Also, follow me on Twitter by searching at Deadpool Speaks for your latest and greatest geeky news and weekly giveaways. See you next time on Chimichanga Talk Presents.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network, your station for all things geek, classic, current, and beyond. Be part of the crew at ESONetwork.com.